Okay, thank you. Good morning or good afternoon, whatever your time might be. It's nice to see you all. I've been asked to talk about the Holocaust and minority rights, which is an important and intriguing topic, not often discussed in this context. So I will try to really raise a few major issues on the topic, and hopefully we'll have fruitful discussions thereafter. The issue of minority rights appeared for the first time within an international context in the wake of World War I at the Paris Peace Conference. This was the outcome of the destruction or transformation of the great multi-ethnic empires. These empires were what came to be called the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, or the Habsburg Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Russian Empire, and the more recent German Empire. In the vast borderlands of Eastern Europe, borderlands that stretched all the way from the Balkans to the Baltic, from areas controlled by the Ottoman Empire all the way to the north, where these four empires met, there now, in the wake of World War I, emerged a variety of new nation-states. These states included such countries as Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria, now not the heart of an empire that no longer existed, Hungary and Yugoslavia. The Russian Empire was transformed into the Soviet Union. The Turkish core of the Ottoman Empire became a Turkish nation-state. The Habsburg Empire broke up into its constituent ethnic or national parts. And the German Empire largely withdrew into its core ethnic German center. So in a sense, what we had was a transformation from an area that was ruled by a few empires that had many ethnicities and nationalities into a multitude of nation-states. But the nation-states were anything but ethnically homogeneous, and they contained large numbers of people who did not belong to the majority ethnicity or religion, and who at times had members of their own ethnicity living in other nation-states, including such states in which they formed the majority. So again, we had a situation where the ideal would have been, the ideal of nationalists in particular, of having homogeneous nation-states, but in fact, each of these nation-states had minorities, and some of these minorities belonged to ethnic groups that had other nation-states in which they were a majority. So for instance, Czechoslovakia had a large number of ethnic Germans. Poland had a large number of ethnic Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Jews. And large numbers of Hungarians ended up in Romania due to the post-war border changes, and so on in many other countries with many other ethnicities. In all of the new nation-states of Eastern Europe, there were large numbers, or smaller numbers, of Jewish populations. Like other ethnic groups, Jews in these new nation-states were concerned about their condition within new political entities that now defined themselves according to the majority ethnic groups, often associated with religion. So if Jews previously had lived in multi-ethnic empires in which there were many nationalities, they now found themselves in countries in which the majority nationality defined the terms of identity in that country. Ethnic groups were also often identified by their socio-economic position in society. Thus, for instance, Ukrainians, or as some were still calling them, Ruthenians, as well as Belarusians and Lithuanians, were more likely than not to be peasants. Poles were often both peasants but simultaneously well represented in urban centers. Jews concentrated mainly in cities and towns, and were engaged mostly in trade, crafts, leasing, and increasingly in the new white-collar professions. This was more the case in Western Europe, and it was becoming more and more so in Central and East Central Europe. Thus, President Woodrow Wilson's famous 14 points, which promised the right of self-determination to national groups, providing an ideal goal, though never actually accepted at the Paris peace treaty, and the rearrangement of political borders as a result of World War I, created the realization of an idea that in fact ensured increasing inter-ethnic and national tensions within and between nation states. So we can say that there was a certain ideal. The ideal was that many of the national tensions that existed in multi-ethnic empires before World War I would be reconciled or would be resolved by the creation of nation states. In fact, this idea did not work out. And it didn't work out because one could not create an ideal nation state under those circumstances. All of these states had large ethnic minorities. The minorities treaties that became part of the Paris Peace Treaty were an attempt by the Entente powers, that is the victorious allies, to impose tolerance of ethnic national minorities on a series of newly created nation states with large numbers of ethnic minorities. So again, what this means is that these nation states were not particularly happy about having minority groups and would have much rather imposed their own identity on them, or in some way or another either removed or marginalized them. And the peace treaties and the minorities treaties imposed that on them, which they accepted reluctantly, largely because they still wanted international recognition as new nation states. In many ways, we cannot understand the history of the interwar period, the origins of World War II, and the Holocaust without taking this process into account. This is a crucial starting point for a process that ends up in World War I and the Holocaust. Here, the case of Poland is most instructive. Interwar Poland was made up of only 60% ethnic Poles, which almost entirely correlated with 60% Roman Catholics, because being a Pole and a Roman Catholic within the Polish context was more or less synonymous. The rest were Ukrainians, Belarusians, Lithuanians, Germans, and Jews. The Jews numbered over 3 million and constituted fully 10% of the entire population of interwar Poland. In the 1930s, the Polish government increasingly restricted equal rights for Jews, in clear violation of the Minorities Treaty. Poland was not the only country that was doing it, but it was the country that had the largest Jewish minority in it, which is our interest today. It was also Poland, the Polish government, in conflict with other ethnicities, especially with Ukrainians, who formed a very large part of the minorities in Poland. In the eastern parts of Poland, which had been reconstituted as an independent country after World War I, following its dismemberment in the 18th century, you may remember that Poland was cut apart, was divided in the late 18th century and ceased to exist until the end of World War I. So in the eastern parts of this new or newly constituted country, Poles were a minority. So in provinces such as Volhynia and Galicia, ethnic Poles and Roman Catholics were a minority. In eastern Galicia, which was known in interwar Poland as Eastern Little Poland, the majority population was made up of Greek Catholic Ukrainians, mostly peasants but not entirely, Roman Catholic Poles, peasants and city dwellers, and Jews, mostly town and city dwellers. Across the border lay Soviet Ukraine. A growing nationalist Ukrainian movement wanted to liberate Polish-ruled Western Ukraine from its Polish occupiers and from its Jews as they saw it. Their version of history, which had to do with a much longer past that we probably cannot talk about now, was that the Jews were the agents of Polish rule and the exploiters of Ukrainian or Athenian peasants. The Polish authorities fought ruthlessly to suppress these nationalists. The Jews were caught in between the Polish nation-state and Ukrainian nationalists. Whichever choice they made, they had the other group against them. The choices they had were assimilation, socialism, or Zionism. And we can talk a little bit about that later on if you wish. The failure of the minority treaties to protect minorities meant that millions of minorities, among them many Jews, tried to leave their countries. For Jews, the main destinations in that period were Palestine and the United States. But in the 1930s, as minorities came increasingly under pressure in Eastern Europe, where most of the Jews lived, the British government restricted immigration of Jews to mandatory Palestine in light of the Arab Revolt of 1936. So while the pressure is building up in Eastern Europe, the gates in Palestine are closing. While the United States restricted Jewish immigration to its shores, first of all, immediately after World War I, and then increasingly in the wake of the Great Depression, unemployment, and growing xenophobia in the United States. So the main gate for Jewish immigration is largely, although not entirely, restricted.